Alright, so what's going on? Simply Shredded. E-Knight here with my favorite little girl for the time being till my new little girl arrives. Going to talk about the shoulder joint a little bit. Shoulder joint, much more complex than people realize. Shoulder complex is actually several joints: your AC joint, your sternoclavicular joint, and your GH joint. The GH joint is the one we're going to be talking about now. GH stands for glenohumeral. You know the anatomy on this already, bear with me, but basically you've got a small indentation on the outside area of your scapula. It's called the glenoid fossa. It's what makes the socket for the ball and socket joint. You also have the head of the humerus. That's the humero part of glenohumeral joint. The head of the humerus fits into that small fossa. It's what makes the ball and socket joint. Now, unlike a lot of other joints, this is not a particularly good fit. We like to think of the joint being more like this. It's not. The glenoid fossa is actually really, really small. It does not cover up the head at all. That's why you have a shoulder labrum. The shoulder labrum is made up of some cartilage that actually helps to kind of keep everything in check there. But as a general rule, because there's so much mobility in the shoulder joint, there's not a lot of stability at all. The fact that the shoulder is able to flex, extend, abduct, adduct, and then also horizontally abduct and horizontally adduct, all that motion, all that mobility, with that you give away a lot of stability. If you think the opposite of that, think about the knee or the elbow, where you've got some lateral collateral ligaments, medial collateral ligaments. In the knee, you've actually got your posterior and anterior cruciate ligaments that cross interiorly. Add some stability to the knee, prevent it from doing anything it shouldn't do. Ligaments in the shoulder, definitely not as strong. They're not going to be as active. What keeps the shoulder joint in place is the dynamic stabilizers. Those dynamic stabilizers, basically the four muscles that make up the rotator cuff. So you're looking at the teres minor, the subscapularis, the infraspinatus, and the supraspinatus muscles. Very small muscles. I'm going to link those, at least a picture of those, to this thread, and you'll be able to see what I mean. Now, what people don't realize, when a joint moves, there's something called arthrokinematics of it. Basically, your head of your humerus, we're going to use this as an example. Even though we know the glenoid fossa is not this big, but if this is the head of the humerus, it doesn't just move in the joint like this. As it moves up, the convex head sits in this concave fossa, and it moves like this. So it actually glides. That's what it's called. It's called a glide or a slide, depending on which text you're reading. The movement of the joint is the roll. The movement of the actual articular surface against each other, that's called the glide or the slide. The only thing that prevents the head of your humerus from actually popping right out of the glenoid fossa and right out of the glenohumeral joint when it slides are the actual rotator cuff muscles, those dynamic stabilizers. So when you think about, this conversation, this topic came to be based on someone stopping short on a bench press, coming down, and instead of actually bringing the bar all the way to the chest, deloading the weight, stopping right here. Well, when you're right here, as you're moving back, what's happening is the arm's moving back, and the head of your humerus is translating forward. So the head of the humerus is actually moving straight out here. And the only thing that's keeping it from actually dislocating and popping right out of the socket, that's those dynamic stabilizers. That's where your rotator cuff comes into play, and it's why it's really important not to stop here, because you have to think about those are four really small muscles, especially in comparison to your pec major, your anterior deltoid, your triceps brachii, any of the muscles that you're thinking of as prime movers, prime activators in a bench press. They're doing all the work. They're going to be able to handle a whole lot more weight than something as small as the infraspinatus or the subscapularis, these little bitty muscles that are really designed not to move weight, but to stabilize the joint, to keep everything in check. So what happens is, after a long period of time doing movements like this, or if you're doing something behind the head, you're not only forcing the muscles to work hard to prevent the head of the humerus from popping out, but now you've got external rotation and you've got scapular retraction here. So it's a really bad position. It's creating a ton more force. It's more torque. Torque is just a fancy, kinematic way of saying force within the muscle. It's a rotational force within the joint, not the muscle. So what you end up with is 4 very small muscles, not designed to try and withstand that kind of force, that kind of torque, trying to hold a bone all by themselves in the joint. They weren't designed to do that, and unfortunately, when you've got any kind of injury to the rotator cuff, it's not something that you generally go, oh, you know what? Rotator cuff's giving me problems, so I can fix it now. Once you realize that you're having problems, that's when you're already going to be in a position to where you probably can't fix it. It's very hard to rehab rotator cuff injuries without actually going to see a physical therapist, or in the worst case scenario, an actual orthopedist if you're going to have any kind of surgery that you're looking at. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions that come along the way. The thing that I wanted to point out, and the reason I did this on a video log instead of actually just typing it out, is I just kind of feel like most people don't realize, they're not aware that in the movement of the joint, it's not just, oh, let's just move up and down against that. It's as we move in one direction, the bone is popping out in the other. And as we go up, then it's going to pop out. That popping out, that's called the slide or the glide, and it has a huge effect on what the actual joint is doing in terms of stability. So I'm going to upload this into YouTube, and then we'll post it. All right, see you guys.